and welcome back to another episode of the Stripped Whole podcast, where we challenge our faith and our perspectives, and we find hope and encouragement in whatever season we find ourselves in. I'm so excited to be here with you today. Thank you so much for stopping by. Let's jump right in. Episode 9. How have we made it this far? I cannot believe I'm nearly done with this first season. It has been unbelievably fun to podcast through Corona. It has been my staple. It has been my consistent, along with so many other things that I wish were not consistent. But it is almost at a close. This is the last but one episode, and I'm so excited to be talking about the topic for today. And I really can't wait to get into season 2. I'm already planning and preparing who I'm going to be inviting in. I want to have lots of guests on season 2. I've got big plans and big vision for it. So I'm excited to come back with that later on in this year. But here's my question, guys. What a time to be alive. It is an insane year. 2020 has lost the plot. I mean, what is going on? First of all, we're all quarantined, and then we're all protesting. It's just been incredible to watch this series of events unfold and to watch the world respond the way that it has to both events, and to see how they've come juxtaposed like they have. It's insane to me that this is all going on at the same time. I'm going to be very interested to see if these protests cause a spike in Corona, because if they don't, I feel like something's wrong. I feel like really that should provide a pretty huge spike. So if it doesn't, we can start looking into some of those conspiracy theories, I reckon. So, moving on, don't want to ruffle too many feathers. Today, we are talking about one of my most favourite topics that I love to talk about. It's a really good topic to talk about with women, and that's my passion. I love talking with women and challenging them to think a little bit differently to maybe the way that they have been. And this topic today is a really good way of doing that. I want to talk about how in the kingdom of God, broken things are beautiful things. That flies in the face of everything the world will tell you. I've said this before, and I'll say it again, and I won't shut up till I'm blue in the face. The principles of the kingdom are always in direct opposition to the principles of the world. And the world will tell you that if something in your life is dysfunctional, that is to be celebrated. That is to be plastered across your t-shirt, owned and celebrated, and it should be part of your identity. I have watched this movement develop and grow in the younger generation, millennials and younger, where they not only come into alignment and agreement with those labels of dysfunction that they have in their lives, but they also celebrate it as part of their identity and part of what makes them unique. And I find that fascinating and very disturbing, because it is an acceptance that less than full and less than whole is and can be what God wants them to be. And I absolutely reject that statement. It cannot be the case. It cannot be the case that God is willing and happy for us to be sitting in our dysfunction and acting as if we're whole. It can't be. They cannot exist side by side. We need to constantly be striving to be whole, to be fully functional, to be fully healed, to be fully restored. But the world will tell us to own it, to celebrate it, and to really identify with that dysfunction as part of our identity. But what I love is how, when you see these things happening in the world so clearly and so obviously in front of your face, you can so easily just flip it on its head and look at, okay, if that's what the world is saying, then it's quite easy for us to understand what God's probably saying, because it's just the direct opposite. If the world is telling me that I should celebrate and own and identify with this dysfunction, then probably God does not want any of those things. So how can we then move forward with the opposite? The opposite is refusing to come into agreement with something that is less than him in our lives. And that is something that I have watched so many women wrestle with, because they've come to a place where they have accepted that their brokenness is A, negative, and B, how they'll always be. I want to address both of those things. I am a really, really big believer in brokenness being such a beautiful place of meeting with God, because it's often not until we're broken that we actually truly come before God, because until we're truly broken, we're not truly after him, because we can do it on our own. And I know that's my story 100%. It was only when I had reached the end of myself and I was utterly broken about it that I really met with God. Until that happened, there was just a little bit of me that was perfectly okay with doing it myself and not needing God at all in the process. And so I love that he allows us to get there. He allows us to get to that place where we're just utterly broken. And it's a place of complete beauty. It's a place of naked realness and a place of being stripped back. And that's what my podcast is all about. This is a podcast that is called Stripped Whole, because that's what happened to me. He took me to that place where everything was stripped away, not only circumstantially and materially, but also in and of myself. I was so broken that what fell onto that carpet that day and what had had enough and what was really at the end of itself was the real core version of myself, the unmasked, not masquerading version, the real true version of me. It fell on the floor that day. Everything else was left behind. I didn't have the energy to carry it with me anymore. And that was a place where God really broke in. He interrupted my narrative that day in a way that left me completely different for the rest of my life. And I go back to that place a lot because I want to stay there. I want to stay in that place where I still don't have a mask. I may not have reached the end of myself on a daily basis. I may not be in that place of utter decimation like I was on that one day, but I want to stay in that place that is before God, unmasked, without a masquerade. That's really the actual real me in communion with actual real God, because that is the whole point of his dwelling and his habitation and his wanting his presence to be transformative. And that's the place it happens. But until we're real about who we are, where we're at, and what's going on in our lives, that transforming power of God's presence can just touch the mask. It doesn't actually touch us. So you see, brokenness is this beautiful place where God is invited in, and God is given a space to reintroduce us to the original plan that he always had for us. It's like we're given a perfect recipe for the best chocolate cake ever created ever in the history of the planet. And we look at it and we go, yeah, but I think I'm just going to chuck in a bit of this oil, and I think I'm just going to add a bit of fake peppermint something, and I'm going to just add a bit of banana, and I'm going to add some flavouring of orange, and I'm going to add, and I'm going to add, and I'm going to add, until it actually is nothing like, in appearance or taste, what it was supposed to be like. And all that this brokenness is in our lives is God just extracting all the stuff that we've added to an original and, in his eye, perfect recipe in the first place. I always talk about bolt-ons. I don't know if anyone out there will remember this. When I was growing up, there was a mobile phone company called O2, which I think is still operating in the UK. They used to have this policy where you get this basic plan for your cell phone, and they would offer you bolt-ons, and you could bolt on extra minutes, extra data, extra text, and they were all called bolt-ons. And I remember being really impacted by that, because I remember thinking, look, that's what I do all the time. I am a package deal that God has created for a specific reason, for a specific purpose and calling and destiny, and I just bolt on stuff all over the place that I think is necessary, whether it's material things, whether it's emotional things, whether it's shutting things off or adding things on, I am bolting things on all of the time. But when God allows us to, basically, God is just really good at letting things play out. He is all about the long con. Now, I don't for a second think that God is conning us, but I do think he allows us to work out and walk through the consequences of our own choices. And when we add and bolt on stuff to his original design, he lets that play out, and he's got this incredible ability to know that it should lead full circle and lead us straight back to him, because we will reach the end of ourselves, because that plan never ever works. And he needs us to get to a place where we know it doesn't work. Not that we're being told it doesn't work by him, where we understand that I did this wrong and I need help. And I now understand this doesn't work. And that's what happened to me on that day, that moment in my life that changed the course of my life forever. I reached the end of myself. I realized that my bolt-ons were no good, that I wasn't being real, that I hadn't been true to God, to myself, to anyone. I actually was just at the end of myself, and on that carpet, on my face, crying my eyes out, was where God stepped in and took over. And what he did was, he did not destroy me. That process never destroyed me. It's very easy for us in brokenness to think that God has destroyed us. God does not destroy his creation. He promised at the time of the flood that he would never destroy his creation again. And so God is never going to destroy you. He only restores. Now, sometimes when you restore things, you have to strip them back a long way. I know that because I've worked in interiors. I used to have an upcycling business. I coach in interiors. Sometimes you can be given a piece of furniture that a client wants upcycled or changed into something else. And you look at it and you think, great, this is a great piece of furniture. And then they say, yeah, but I don't want it that color. I want it to be white, or I want it to be wood. And you think, all right, well, I'll just put a bit of paint stripper on it and I'll get the sander on it. It'll be good as new. You take it home, you start working on it, and you realize how many layers of paint, varnish, years, dust, hardness has grown on this wood. And you have to strip it back and strip it back and strip it back. And it's painful to watch this poor wood. I mean, this is an analogy, but it's painful to watch this wood go through the restoring process, because some of that stuff is so stuck on, and you have to work really hard to get it off, whether it's through chemicals, whether it's through elbow grease, whether it's through sanding, whether it is with a chisel. I have chiseled paint and varnish off wood before to try and get it like new. It is hard work, but you're not destroying the piece of furniture along the way. You're simply restoring what was always there. And actually, what I love about upcycling, and I think this is how God operates, is that he not only do you restore something to its former glory, but you actually upgrade it. You can actually use the nooks and the chinks and the character that's been built through those layers and through that seasoning through time to actually give that piece more value, more worth, and more character. And I think that's so what God does with us. Nothing is wasted that we go through. He can take every chink, every battering, every knock, every nook and cranny, every bit of dirt, everything that has left a mark on our lives, and he can make it a characteristic, something that makes us more valuable as a result of what we've gone through. So we do get tricked into thinking that brokenness is a bad place, a bad thing, and that God is just destroying us. And I just don't buy it. God is not into destroying. He's not a God of destruction. He's a God of restoration. And when we understand that, we can start looking at the things we're going through and seeing them as part of that process of stripping away, cleansing, wearing down. The wood is not enjoying this process. It's not a massage. You can't massage a piece of wood back to its former glory. You have to get tough with it. You have to match the degree of the strength of what's on the wood with the strength of how you remove that from the wood. You can't massage oil into wood and then expect the paint to fall off. It's not how it works. You have to really work that off. God does that with us in our lives. Now, the second thing about brokenness that I mentioned earlier is that we think it's a bad thing and we think it's how we'll always remain. Now, this is something that I really believe that women have been tricked into believing, that these are two wrapped up together issues. Number one, that it's bad. Number two, that we're going to stay there. Now, I've got a question to ask here. What would be so wrong with staying there? Because this is the place where God is most invited into our lives. When we're at the end of ourselves, that's the place where God starts. And I don't know about you, but I want to stay there. And I've actually found myself over the years asking God to keep me in a place where I'm just at the end of myself. Like, may I never do anything in my own strength. May I never get to a place where I don't need God. You know, there's that famous Pinterest meme that goes around saying, you need God just as much on your good days as you do in your worst moments. And it's true. We get really tricked into thinking, oh, I don't need God as much today because I've kind of got this today. I'm good. I'm set. My own strength is sufficient and I'm good. And it's only when we have a catastrophe that we go, oh, no, God, where are you? And we start turning back to him. But actually, staying in that place of brokenness where we are deconstructed enough that we need God to stay put together is a place that I want to stay. And I have found myself asking for God to keep me in that place. And it is a very tender place to stay. It's a very risky place to stay, but it is really the place of greatest breakthrough, because if you are staying in that place where you cannot function without God, he gets to do things far above and beyond and far greater than we ever would have done in our own strength. But if we get to a place where we don't need God anymore, we're limiting what can be done to our own strength. And I don't want to do that in my life. I just don't. I'm not interested in functioning at my capacity, because my capacity sucks. I'm not a particularly interesting, great person. I'm just an average human. I'm capable of doing what average people can do. And actually, I'd much rather stay on the edge of myself and invite God in and allow for what God is capable of doing to be what decides what I do. I hope that's in any way clear. Yes, I don't want to stay in that place where I was that day, face down on the carpet, where I was actually in turmoil because I needed God to break in. There is a difference between staying in a place of brokenness that is healthy and staying in a place of turmoil where you are not at peace and rest. And that day when I was face down on the carpet, I was not at peace and rest. I was in turmoil. My spirit was not at peace. And I needed God to break in and change things. And he did. But what I learned was not to just retreat. God fixed it, and now I retreat back to where I was, and now I can put my defenses back up and I can start operating in my own strength. No, I learned to stay on that edge. And it's a very risky place to stay because it makes you incredibly vulnerable to attack. It makes you vulnerable to other people rejecting you and hurting you, but it makes you vulnerable as well to hearing the voice of God. And that is what I want in my life. Because when you stay in that place of vulnerability where you choose to stay broken before him, you are opening up the possibility for God's presence to flood your life on a daily basis, for you to hear his voice every day. And when that happens, everything around you changes. That's a place of redemption. It's a place of creativity. And it's a place of complete restoration. That's what I have experienced in my life. That day on the carpet was a turning point in my life where I learned the difference between brokenness and turmoil. And that's why I believe broken things are beautiful things. One of the things that I do on Ascend, which is this 10-day program that I've talked to you about before, and the link's going to be in the show notes if you're interested in coming. one of the things that we do on the creative track, which is the track that I lead, is we play around with pottery, and we actually play with this concept of brokenness, making something more beautiful. And I love doing this exercise with people because it always throws them off. They spend so long perfecting their clay pottery and making it absolutely perfect, and they're so proud of it and they love it, and they've spent hours investing in making this thing exactly the way that they want it. And I then ask them to smash them. And the looks on people's faces when I say that they're going to drop them on the stone floor, they're mortified, they're so upset, and they're so confused. Why would you want me to break my perfect thing? But you know what we end up doing is we rebuild them, and we use amazing colours and gold accents and all these beautiful things to actually highlight all the broken places, and it makes the pottery more beautiful. And it's amazing to watch people's reaction to this. They resist that process so much. They're so invested in their pot, in their piece that they've worked on. They don't want to mess with it. But then at the end, they are so much happier with their pot. It's incredible because they've elevated it from being just a really nice pot to being something completely unique, something completely individual, something completely, all those broken places have been highlighted and anointed almost with golden paint and copper paint and all these beautiful highlights. And it makes the pot more, it gives it more character, it gives it more value, and it has a story. And the story always points to the potter. It doesn't point to anybody else, it points to the potter. And that's the amazing thing about choosing to stay in that place of brokenness, is that yes, you may get hurt. Yes, you may have some of your broken places highlighted. It may become one of your characteristics. And I'm not talking about dysfunctional broken places here. I'm talking about optional brokenness where we choose to be vulnerable and weak before God so that He can be great. I'm not talking about plastering eating disorders across my t-shirts. I'm talking about remaining weak so that He can be strong and not doing things in my own strength. There is a very big difference, and it is very important that that's understood. When I choose to remain weak and remain vulnerable before God and not to just resort to my own strength, everything about my life points to the potter. All those gold lines that emerge, all those broken things and broken places, and even if it's dysfunctional broken from my past, when I fall before God without my own strength, those are the places that He can actually highlight with His golden refining oil, and they can start making His pottery in my life. My life, He's the potter, I'm the clay. He can start highlighting those places and making them the thing that gives me more character, the thing that gives me more value, the things that gives me more of a story that points to His glory. And that is what this is all about. My story is all about His glory. And if I am broken, His power, His love, His strength, His will in my life will be more evident. If I am strong, my will is more evident. And I never want to be in that position where it's all about me, it's all about my will. So today is really just about trying to flip on its head this understanding of brokenness and how we can start to remove all these negative associations that we have with brokenness being a bad place where God is destructive, and it becoming this beautiful place where God is glorified and God is invited and God is given space to restore and redeem. And today is also about how we should want to stay in that place that glorifies God because we opt to use His strength instead of our own. Where no, we should not remain in turmoil and we should not remain in dysfunction, but we should remain in a place where it's all about His strength, His will in our lives, not our own. So this podcast is called Stripped Whole. That's my story, my testimony, and it's definitely reflected in this episode, where it's all about how God stripped away, like that piece of wood I was talking about earlier. He stripped and stripped and stripped me back and back to the original plank, the original design of the wood that was underneath, those unique knots and grains, those unique colours and tones that are individual on every single piece of wood out there. That's what he's doing. That's what he's looking for. And we can decide if we want to make that process harder on ourselves or easier on ourselves. But the point of the matter is, that's a place where God can intervene. He can get involved. He can change up the narrative. One of the things I come across the most when I'm coaching or teaching on online courses is women who just really struggle to believe that God could ever redeem or restore certain things that they've gone through in their lives. And I love to hear that from people, because I know that God is up to something great and he's going to surprise them. And I love hearing stories weeks, days, months later, because I keep in touch with quite a lot of these women over the years. What I love to hear is how God has shown up in that thing and has over and over and over again, the same message has come through. That was not wasted. It was not wasted. And what the enemy meant for evil, I am using for good. And it's just incredible, and it's the most exciting thing for me to see, because I know it from my own story. So when I come across women who say to me, there's just no way that God can ever do anything good from this, nothing good can come from this, I see that as a challenge every time, and I'm like, okay, all right, let's put that challenge before God and see what he does. And every time God shows up and redeems and restores, because he does not ever destroy his creation. We're not just any old bit of creation. We're the part of creation that represent his image. So he is not going to destroy it. He can't. It would be like destroying himself. He did it once, and he said he'd never do it again. And so we can rest assured on that promise. He is never going to destroy his creation. He's not going to destroy you. So I challenge you, if you're walking through something where you cannot see how God could ever use this for good, or how anything positive could come from it, I challenge you to challenge God. Give him the place to intervene in that situation and turn it around for good. Now, I will warn you, it probably won't happen on your terms or the way that you would like it to, but it will happen. And I've seen that over and over and over again in so many lives. It is just one of the most incredible things about God, because no matter how terrible, awful, disgusting, and just wretched you may feel, or the situation may be, his creativity far outweighs our creativity. And he can think of ways, and he can come up with ways that things can be redeemed that we can't even dream of. So rest assured that that broken place in your life is an amazing opportunity for God to change the narrative, and for you to invite him in, and his strength and his power and his glory into your life, because you're done. That's a beautiful place to be. And rest assured that God can restore and redeem the thing that has brought you to your knees. He can and he will. He did for me, and he is always doing for me. Because I told you earlier, I've chosen in my life to try, and I've asked God to help me with this, and he loves to oblige me in this, but I've asked him to keep me in that place of brokenness. And I've noticed that since I've prayed that, anytime I start to feel a little bit, good about myself, and I'm pretty good at this stuff, I could do this in my own strength, he loves to bring me right back to my knees, where I'm like, yeah, no, you're right, yeah, no, I can't do it. I can't do it without you. It's all about you. And I need to stay face down and not take any of the glory, and not put my own strength on it, and to just let you do your thing. So be encouraged if that is your story, because your story is not there to give you anything. It's there to give him the glory. So step out of the way and let him have it. Otherwise, you're going to be fighting. You're going to be fighting against what God has ordained. And God has always ordained that our lives are there to give him glory. So let's just let him have it and not try and keep any for ourselves. Let's just let him do it in his strength. Let's just let him show the world what he can do with a life that's surrendered. That's the greatest testimony there is on the planet. So to sum up today's episode, I just want to encourage you that that broken place in your life is truly a place of beauty, and that it's a place where he can redeem and restore. And it's a place where he can strip you back to the original design that he always planned for your life. If you're willing to stay in that place on the edge where you're done with your own strength, you're done with yourself, you're at the edge of yourself, and that's where he can start taking over and he can step in.
That's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for coming to hang out with me on this Stripped Whole podcast. If you've liked what you've heard today, please leave a rating and a comment down below so that we can hear your feedback and do better next time. Thank you, and I'll see you on the next episode.